Coming up in a moment, our exclusive interview with Olympic gold medalist Aly Raisman. The two-time captain of the U.S. women's gymnastics team recently revealed that she was sexually assaulted by Team USA doctor Larry Nassar. Other members of the Olympic team say that they were as well. The entertainment, political, journalism worlds continue to reel from revelations of sexual harassment and assault. Now the sports world and our most accomplished Olympians. And joining us for more is Phil Hellmuth, the athletic director at Booker High School, and Cathy Wilson, who counsels victims of sexual harassment, assault, and abuse at Centerstone. Thank you both for joining us today. And Phil, let me start with you. When the revelations about the Team USA doctor came out, were a lot of not only teachers, coaches, students, and parents at Booker talking about this and what it meant for athletics?
Absolutely. It's one of those things that there can't be enough awareness about. And of course, when something like this happens, it's good to talk about it and keep it out in front of everybody. And that, the biggest thing we have to do as adults, as educators, as coaches, we have to keep it out there and make sure the awareness is up there and people can react to it.
As times have changed, is the awareness of the problem and the reaction to it have also changed in terms of schools and how schools handle things like this?
I think it has. We've had, of late, we've had so many cases where, in politics, all kinds of different arenas, this has come up. And it's constantly in front of us, so therefore we as adults, especially as educators and coaches, et cetera, we need to be in the front line of keeping it out there.
Cathy, this has kind of exploded onto the national consciousness right now with what happened to Harvey Weinstein and the Senate candidate in Alabama, the journalism world, and so forth, and go on and on. But you have been dealing with this for years, have you not?
Yes, actually, when I first came to Centerstone about 11 years ago, I was hired to be the supervisor of the Rape Crisis Program, which we had since the mid-'80s. And we really worked directly with law enforcement in the hospitals when a rape victim or someone victim of sexual assault comes into the hospital or reports that crime to the police. And so we have been dealing with this for many, many years. And a lot of times people are really surprised about how frequently we have reports, how frequently people are getting abused. And
give us some idea. How frequently does this happen to the point that it gets to your attention?
Well, we treat both adults and children, and I believe last fiscal year, we treated over 1,000 clients, individual clients with different levels of abuse, sexual abuse that's happened to them over that period of time.
Have you seen a difference since this has really been in the news with the Larry Nassar situation and everything that's happened from Hollywood to Capitol Hill,
right,
in terms of the frequency people are coming in and how families and victims are reacting to it?
Anytime there's a story that comes out or there's a national spotlight is put on abuse in general, we do see an uptick in our calls. And generally, that's good. We see that as a good thing. It's generally because people are hearing about it. They feel a little less frightened to come forward. They feel that they get a little power from other people's stories. And so they're able to come forward. And sometimes we just get calls from other people wanting to ask some questions about it and want to know for their own neighbors or their children's sake what signs they should be looking for or what they can do to help people.
If we only have a few seconds left here, but has the directors from the school district changed in terms of how the athletic department, coaches, and teachers handle allegations?
Probably the biggest thing is just having an awareness of it, and the essence of what the approach is trying to make everybody aware that it's very important that we make our kids feel comfortable about coming forth and just talking about it. And it's a relational type thing, and that's probably the essence of what we want them to do.
Okay, we are just getting started. We'll have much more on sexual harassment in athletics right after we check the first alert weather, so stay with us. Welcome back. Aly Raisman is one of the most accomplished women athletes in American history. Gold medal winner and captain of the women's gymnastic team at the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio. She is also a victim of sexual abuse by team Dr. Larry Nassar, who was just sentenced this month on 22 charges of sexually abusing young girls. Aly Raisman was in Sarasota this week, invited by the Jewish Federation to talk about the 11th anniversary of Women's Day. We sat down with the Olympian who, like so many women, are now saying, "Me too."
I think it's really important that people speak up. I think it's really important that men and women, girls and boys, everyone speaks up, because the more that we talk about it, the more that it's clear that abuse is never okay. I mean, I can't even, it's hard for me to comprehend the fact that we still have to say abuse is not okay. I can't really understand how some people think it's okay to hurt someone else and how many people look the other way. It's disgusting.
Do you think we're at a national turning point?
I mean, I hope so. I hope that it's a big turning point. I mean, it's alarming how many people are being abused, have been abused, you know, people that are suffering in silence. It's a very, very big problem. I think our society and everyone needs to wake up, because it's unfortunately it's so common, and I mean, it shouldn't even happen to one person. So I hope our society can stop victim shaming and being kind and being supportive of one another too.
Is it because of the way things were in terms of talking about these things, which you think was responsible for what happened with Team USA and the physician there, and what happened to you and to others?
Well, I think, you know, personally for myself, I just didn't really realize I was being abused, because I was so horribly manipulated, and I was being groomed, and I was brainwashed to think that my doctor was a good person. And so what I'm trying to do is really talk about and educate people, because I think people don't really understand how complicated abuse is. It's not just you're suffering in the moment that the abuse occurs. It's, you know, it's all the other moments of when that person who is abusing you is giving you gifts. They're making you feel like they're a good person. They're tricking you, and they're telling you all these things. So it's really confusing. And, you know, it's not that simple where you just think, okay, he's hurting me. It's just he was very manipulative, so I genuinely thought he was my friend. And, you know, he was a doctor, so you would never ever think that a doctor would be abusing his power. I mean, it's just, it's awful. But I think the more we start talking to kids about it at a very young age and teaching them that, you know, that if someone is mistreating you and making you uncomfortable just because they're giving you gifts, just because they're being nice to you, just because everyone says they're a good person, just because they have a, you know, position of power, it doesn't make it okay. In fact, it's not okay at all.
Do you see yourself now as having a role going into the future in terms of communicating that message to young women?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think the most important thing for people to understand is that abuse can happen to anyone. You know, we see society talks a lot more about women being abused, but also, you know, there are a lot of men, there are a lot of boys out there that are being abused too, and we have to talk about that as well. We have to teach men and women and boys and girls to respect each other, and I 100% seeing myself doing this for, you know, as long as I can to educate people and to help people, because I think being supportive to one another is so important. I think being supportive to those that come forward, and also being supportive to those who don't want to come forward publicly. Not everyone wants to share their story publicly, and that's okay. Whether you come forward, you know, right now, in 6 months, in 10 years, everyone has to be supportive. Everyone copes with things differently.
More is Phil Helmuth, the athletic director at Booker High School, and Cathy Wilson, who heads counseling, victims and sexual harassment, assault services, and abuse at Centerstone. You know, Cathy, when we were airing the interview, you were sitting there nodding your head, like this is a common storyline.
True. It is a common storyline, and unfortunately, but I do agree with her that the more we talk about it, and just like we were talking about earlier, the more we have it on the forefront, the more we're talking about it with our young men and young women that are in athletics and in different venues, the more we're sort of slaying the dragon. We're telling people it's not okay. And it takes all of us to try to eliminate something like sexual abuse, whether it be with children or with adults. It takes really all of us to decide that it's not okay, that we do need to stand up for people and not be so harsh on victims. I think we live in a very victim-blaming society where it's very hard and difficult for that victim to decide to come forward because they know that it's going to be backlash on them. There's going to be a lot of questions about their integrity, about them and personally, and we need to eliminate that so that the people can feel.
We are seeing that in real life right now in the news, where you have the situation involving Roy Moore, the Senate candidate in Alabama, and a lot of people are going after the victims or alleged victims, and making insinuations about them and their truthfulness, and that's part of the problem. But what is also amazing to me is you see this every single day, but Aly Raisman was at the top of sport. I mean, the U.S. Olympic team. But that was not enough to shield her from what's happening to young women and young boys everywhere.
I think the tragedy of this thing, this young woman spent her whole life preparing for this thing. And everything was given, made tremendous sacrifices, and she thought, here you have something that's supposed to be at the pinnacle of her life. She can always look at this thing as being a tremendous, tremendous thing that happened to her. And now she's look back at it, and it's tainted. And she, I'm sure, struggled with that whole thing. Well, should I say anything, or how's it going to be looked at? And then, no, I'm just going to probably sweep it under the carpet or whatever. But you can't do that. The thing I really appreciate about what she did was, as a high-profile athlete, not being afraid to step up and say, "Hey, look, this happened to me," and hopefully there's a lot of other athletes and other people that are being abused that say, "You know what? This is going to give me some power and some strength to step forward for myself."
What is incredible here is, despite that, Aly Raisman and the other members of the women's gymnastics team, they won the gold medal. They did not let what happened to them rob them of their dream of Olympic gold, but still there are scars there and things that they will be dealing with for the rest of their lives because of what happened to them.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, I think that that's what shows that people are not weak. We're not weak, and we're not unable to overcome the things that happen to us. And a lot of times, athletes in particular are able to put things in certain buckets so they can perform, because that's what they're taught to do, especially at that level. So I think that just shows us that they knew what they were doing to perform for the country and to bring that pride that we all had when we watched them perform. But at the same time, behind the scenes, we really need to be vigilant as parents, as other athletes that are working with other athletes, peers, and then just passerbyers, bystanders, to really make sure we're vetting the people that are working with our kids and working with vulnerable adults.
And Phil, I think there's something you wanted to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the fact that they actually won the gold medal on top of all these things happened at that time, I mean, it goes to how mentally tough they are. And I think that should be an inspiration to all of us, not to minimize what happened, but there's tremendous things that can happen to us, tragedies that can happen. We can still step up and we can be successful. And
I'm sorry, but there are still interesting questions that need to be answered. How does a guy like this make it through whatever system to be the coach of Team USA? And I know on the local level, whether you're a coach or a teacher or a volunteer, you have to go through a criminal background check. But what we see here is it doesn't always come up with the problems that could be out there.
Well, I think one of the things that happened is, this doctor, whoever goes through his professional career, he's successful. And, people don't want to believe, maybe somebody might have seen this or that or the other thing. They don't want to believe this thing. But what we have to do is, it's kind of like that thing where the way you handle bully is you stand around that, that person that's getting victimized, and you say, no, we're not going to put up with this stuff. So, again, it's the whole thing of being very vigilant and, trying to, make sure that we don't allow this thing to happen. At the same time, making sure that, our athletes, our students, feel comfortable with coming forth and taking the steps that need to happen.
All right, we have to take a quick break. We'll be back for final thoughts when we return. And our guests join us right now for final thoughts. So, Phil, what do you want your student athletes, your parents, your coaches, and the faculty to take out of what you saw from Aly Raisman's interview today?
I think there's two things. One of them is the adults and the people in charge need to really just be vigilant. I've talked about it before. The other thing is, and I really would like to challenge, students, athletes, everybody across the board, if something is happening to you, step forward and talk. Find somebody that you can trust and take care of it. We'll stand behind you, we'll process it. That's probably the biggest thing. And I just hats off to Aly for coming forward, and the other Olympians, for doing it, because I think there's going to be a raised level of awareness, and hopefully it'll help other people step forward.
And Cathy, for those people who are out there who would go to a place like Center Stone for help, what do you want them to know about the kind of help that's out there?
Well, it's a non-judgmental, we believe you, first and foremost, and that's probably one of the biggest things they want to hear. They don't want to, they want to be believed, supported, and they want to know what's out there for them as far as their rights as a victim, and that's what we can do. We can certainly give them that support. And I hope that people learn from all of these different people that are coming out that there is life after this. There is someone to support you, and to find that teacher or that mentor or a place like Centerstone to come forward and talk about it is the first step.
And that's a great way to end our discussion. Thank you both for joining us. FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And for the latest local breaking news, don't forget to download the updated version of our app. If your current app doesn't work, that's because it's expired. Just go to the App Store and re-download it by searching for WWSB or My Suncoast. We want to thank all our guests for being here tonight. Olympic gold medalist Aly Raisman, Phil Helmuth, the athletic director of Booker High School, and Cathy Wilson, who counsels victims of sexual harassment, assault, and abuse at Centerstone.